You need to hear about this crazy drama in the Pokemon community that took place this weekend. We've got leaks, rumors, and much, much more. Let's dive in. So it all started when Patters posted this tweet that says the Pokemon Company thinks Nuzlocke runs are on the same level as ROM hacks according to former Nintendo employees. We gotta play the clip.
And if so, do you have any stories to tell? Well, we have a great story.
So this commenter asks, have you ever played any Nuzlocke Pokemon runs? And they go on and talk about a story.
To tell about this, where we thought that this would be a fun idea for a Nintendo Minute video.
We did, yeah.
And so we pitched it to the Pokemon Company and say, hey.
So these guys pitched a Nintendo Minute video, like a piece of Nintendo content, to Pokemon saying, hey, we want to do a Nuzlocke run for this piece of content.
It slapped.
We would like to do a Nuzlocke run. What do you think?
And they thought they were going to fire us.
They said, here's what we think. Bam!
Yeah, no, seriously. I was like, oh, shoot.
So they said, we consider this to be on the same level as using like hack games, ROM hacks.
So according to these two individuals, the Pokemon Company, when asked, hey, can we do a Nuzlocke run for this piece of content? They said, no, you guys are basically hacking if you're doing Nuzlockes. Now, before you get enraged, I gotta tell you the full story, but let's watch the rest of the clip.
Like, how is that the same?
Excuse me?
I don't know, how they get to these decisions.
This is just a style of playing a game that everybody can buy. There's no hacking.
Yeah, they're
You're
not
just playing the
using
game.
anything weird.
That was truly, again, one of the more like,
what?
Wait, what? Responses.
Yeah. And then there was a lot of creators that played Nuzlocke, a style of Pokemon. They got like erased from their creator program.
So now you can.
So I'm going to talk about that point as well. Content creators who do Nuzlocke style of gameplay that get erased from the Pokemon Company's creator program.
See like why people got afraid to propose what seemed like very basic ideas.
Yeah.
Because there was such just unpredictability of like, am I going to get like in huge trouble for
And now they're talking about a very important kind of thing in workplace culture of like, they went to their bosses essentially and they said, hey, we've got this really cool idea. The idea gets shut down and now they feel like they're basically shunned in the company.
It really did. Like we
normal
got
thing.
Huge, and like the thing is like once you get in trouble,
then that's your reputation.
They don't want to trust you again. You like lose access to all these things.
So you do nothing.
Exactly. Or you make curry.
And you just skate by.
You do nothing, you make curry, and you skate by. So, as you can tell, this is a really big deal, and there's a reason why this clip has 2 million views, over about 11,000 retweets. Actually insane. I'm gonna give you guys my thoughts on that. Then we'll talk a little Scarlet and Violet stuff. So, as I said, I think there's a few things that need to be clarified here, which I will get to. My first hot take response, I tweeted, this is an example of how a company gets too big to truly listen to their audience. I don't blame them. It happens to every large company, but it's unfortunate. What a weird take. This was my first reaction to this. Then kind of some more information came out regarding this and kind of the stance of Pokemon and kind of how some of this information may be slightly misconstrued. I will also throw in a joke tweet that I put out there. I said, Pokemon reportedly has said that shiny hunting is basically cheating and you should find shinies naturally instead of hunting them down. Players found shiny hunting in Scarlet and Violet will have their save files erased. /S, which I was very familiar with denoting sarcasm. Apparently a lot of people don't know that /S indicates sarcasm in terms of like text tones. So I followed up by saying /S means sarcasm on the internet. A lot of people thought this was a serious post. I was just memeing, guys, on the topic nonetheless. But let's talk about this, right? This idea that there's the potential that Pokemon Company considers Nuzlockes to be on the same level as like ROM hacking, right? Or like randomizers and stuff. The general thought here is that there must be some miscommunication. Joe Merrick has decided to go to Twitter, and I love Joe. I love Cerebi.net. He has gone to Twitter to say, here is the official statement about the whole situation from TPCI, Pokemon Company International. Quote, we do not have any issues with fans/creators playing the games with Nuzlocke rules, end quote. And he says, call me a liar, but this is from TPCI's mouth. But it's not, it's from your mouth, Joe. And I feel like my only hang up here is I think it's great that Joe is someone who wants to construe the right information, and part of the reason I'm making this video is to kind of get the right information out there and my perspective on everything. But I don't feel like this is Joe's situation where he should be the one telling people TPCI's official statement. Pokemon Company should put an official statement if they want to put out the fire. Nonetheless, like I said, a lot of respect for Joe. I got no issues with him, but I just find that this should be from Pokemon, and they're just so big that they're not going to do that, right? That's just the reality of it. But let's talk about this topic, right? Because there's a few things going on here. I don't think Pokemon has an issue with Nuzlockes in general, and even if they do, who cares? But I don't think they have an issue with that. But it is very clear that as a company, they have a problem with randomizers, fake Pokemon games, Pixelmon, the MMO, whatever, Pokemon Online things, right? Things of that nature, right? But they're very selective about the things that they choose to do things about. They shut down games like Pokemon Uranium. They shut down things like Pokemon Brick Bronze in Roblox that have used their IP, but then they let things like Pokemon Showdown just exist, which honestly is, Pokemon Showdown is such a vital tool, but like, normally in the world of like businesses, if something like Pokemon Showdown pops up, but it's for a different company, you say, okay, we're gonna acquire Pokemon Showdown and we're gonna put our IP on it and we're gonna make it the official battle simulator for Pokemon. But they don't do that. They just say, okay, we're gonna let it exist and pretend it doesn't exist. So anyway, in the context of like content creators, I can tell you guys firsthand, I'm someone who was in the Nintendo partner program at one point, which by the way was probably the most horrendous program I've ever been in. They like took monetization from creators. They ended up scrapping it because it was really bad. It was very archaic in terms of what content creation is nowadays. But it was in a program that I felt was all that great at the time. It may be better now. And then I was also in a situation where Pokemon was very generously sending me cool things at one point. They sent me like an advent calendar for Christmas and things of that nature. And I've also been sponsored by Pokemon at different times in my career, but I have zero affiliation with them now because I do things that they don't like. I do randomizers, I do Nuzlockes with randomizers, I play Pixelmon, I do these different things, and they don't like those things. And I know they don't because I've had conversations with them about this, right? So it's not that surprising to me that this is such a big blown out situation. I would say generally speaking, if you're someone who's just playing a Nuzlocke, they don't care. If you're someone who's doing a randomizer, they're not gonna wanna associate with you in that period of time. My understanding, my personal understanding, was you needed to be clean of the content for 6 months to begin working with them again. That's what was communicated directly to me, actually. This was a few years ago, but nonetheless. So if in theory I say, okay, you know what, I'm not gonna post any more randomizers, I'm not gonna post any more leak videos, I'm not gonna do any of that stuff for 6 months, then there's a world where maybe they'll wanna work with me again, which is fine. I obviously make the choice that I make because I like to cover the things that I cover. It's not a big deal to me whether I have a relationship with Pokemon in terms of them sending me stuff. It's all good. So that's the take there. That's my take from it. That's my experience from the situation. I don't blame Pokemon, right? They have a brand that they're focusing on. They're trying to basically keep the brand, the control of the brand. They don't want, fans to find randomizers and stuff like that. I don't know. It's just one of those things though. Like I said, when companies get really big, there's a lot of pieces, a lot of cogs, a lot of people working there. It's hard to do little things. You have a small game studio coming up that's making a Pokemon-like game, like, what was the one I recently played that was really good? Monster Sanctuary. Like, that game was sick, and there was like a Nuzlocke type mode in that game. So those games are smaller, so they can easily listen to the community and say, okay, we're gonna do this here. So anyway, I'm curious on your take on this. Obviously, this created a tremendous amount of drama in the community. A lot of people misunderstanding what was being said, not knowing what the truth is, not obviously getting a statement. A lot of people were attacking Joe, which is ridiculous in my opinion. The guy's just trying to tell people the truth. I'm sure I didn't make the situation any better with my jokes and kind of my prodding and sharing of it. But nonetheless, it seems as though this was a clip that was definitely taken slightly out of context, but nonetheless, I think that there's a level of frustration built up over these types of things. So yeah, my advice is if you're a Pokemon content creator and you want to get, working with Pokemon, don't do randomizers, don't do things like that. If you don't care like me, then have fun. That's the way I look at it. So switching gears to kind of some Scarlet and Violet stuff, which I did want to talk about today. There was a few tweets that came out. Riddler Coup posting about there's some different characters here. There's some translation concerns about what this is, but the interpreted thought is that there may be no battle tower, and that's kind of been a resounding theme, is that the post-game in this will be pretty limited in the sense that it's not going to be very robust. You have to complete the 3 stories to complete the main game. The post-game is going to be relatively simple because we're going to get DLC, right? We know there's going to be DLC coming for this game, so that makes a lot of sense there. Apparently, bottle caps have a change in Generation 9 that make them better. We don't know exactly what that bottle cap change is. A few things come to mind for me. One is it no longer works at level 100. Maybe it works at level 50, which is way better if that's the case, because having to get a Pokemon to level 100 is like half the battle in terms of trying to train Pokemon if you want to do it legitimately. The other thing would be maybe the bottle cap allows you to select an IV 0 to 31 or 0 and 31. That's one thing that I think is missing right now with bottle cap functionality, is like a rusty bottle cap or something similar where you can floor an IV stat. So instead of maxing it to 31, you can set it to 0, because certain Pokemon benefit from 0 IVs. Particularly Trick Room Pokemon is the one that really stands out. Pokemon that want to be as slow as possible, so that way they move first under the Trick Room condition. But there's also instances of wanting to have your attack stat as low as possible if you're a special attacker like Chandelure, and you want to reduce your damage from Confusion, which is based on your attack stat, or reduce your damage from the move Foul Play, which is based on your attack stat. So there's a few unique instances of when you want to have a 0 IV, and Pokemon has not really made that feasible. You have to breed for it. But since they're removing breeding, apparently through the leaks, and we're getting a new system for that, it's possible we see a bottle cap overhaul. The last thing is the breakdown of the Pokedex guide. We have the images that the Pokedex Region Handbook is kind of released or coming out. We know that this is 192 pages for Paldea. To compare, Alola was 192 pages. There was 301 Pokemon in that guidebook. The thought right now is Alola had about 86 new Pokemon. But I don't necessarily think this is an apples to apples comparison here. Galar used a lot of Gigantamax Pokemon in their pages, which kind of fluffed up the book size. So listen, it's the same size as Alola, but I wouldn't look at this and say, oh, we're only getting 82 new Pokemon. We already know that there's a ton of forms like Paradox forms and things like that. So as much as this is a story, it's not a story. Like I wouldn't base the pages of the guidebook on the quality of the amount of Pokemon or anything like that. I just don't think there's a direct correlation. Is there a correlation? Yes, but is it like one that guarantees how many Pokemon there are? I don't think so. So again, I wouldn't read too much into this, but I thought it was worth mentioning. So now you're caught up on all the Pokemon drama. Again, my take on this situation is it just is what it is. I thought it was kind of entertaining to watch the drama ensue from the outside there. I don't think Pokemon ultimately has an issue with Nuzlocke. Nuzlocke are confined to the game. It's like playing a normal game. I think this is a communication mistake or a misunderstanding of what took place, where Pokemon thought they were trying to do a randomizer, or maybe they don't know the terms aren't the same thing. A lot of times randomizers and Nuzlocke are kind of paired together, but they are different things, obviously. And, that's just kind of my insight and my take there. But I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know. And again, no hate towards anybody. Obviously, this is just kind of just a funny bit of information. It just shows how the internet works. Things can spread very, very quickly. And, sometimes the truth isn't exactly right there at the forefront of it. I know I've been involved in stuff where, like, some drama comes out and very quickly it spreads and the full story never actually gets out there, and it's an unfortunate situation. So I thought I'd do my part to kind of talk about it, give my experience, and kind of hopefully clear some of the air there. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.